Today we have a fantastic lineup of speakers for you. We have Malia from KPMG, we have Derek, our CTO of Getvisibility, and we have Ahmed from Starlink Distribution. We are going to have some very interesting discussion around how organizations can embrace artificial intelligence and machine learning to deal with some of the challenges around data regulation. And we're going to provide you with some unique insights in how to deal with these problems from a regulatory standpoint, an information security standpoint, a cybersecurity standpoint, and a data governance standpoint. So with that said, we will also have a couple of polls running throughout the presentation, and you please feel free to participate in those polls, and we will share the results at the end when we have our question and answers. So to kick it off, I'll hand over to Malia from KPMG in UAE. Malia, over to you.
Thanks very much, Derek. I'm very pleased to be in this session today to talk about data-centric security and data classification. So my name is Maliha Rashid. I'm a director at KPMG in the UAE, where I lead our data privacy services. I'm going to talk to you about data classification and why it's become so important today. I'll also be talking to you about how to implement data classification successfully before I hand over to Derek. So what we're seeing today, particularly with COVID-19 and the pandemic, is that in the UAE, a lot of organizations have had to move to the cloud very quickly. One of the concerns around that is, have these organizations stopped to consider what company data should be moved to the cloud? What data is secret? What data, for example, concerns customers or employees and needs to stay within the premises of the organization? It's also important to consider data and its security when you're leveraging the value of data and sharing data with third parties. We have a host of regulations in the UAE today that talk about data classification as a requirement and also require for certain types of data to stay, for example, in country. A good example is the federal law for healthcare that requires for patient data to stay in country. So these are all considerations when you're talking about data security and a data-centric approach. We are moving away from traditional perimeter-based security today, and data-centric security is key to that approach, and data classification is at the heart of it. So how do you implement data classification successfully? I think the start is to understand how data is flowing across your organization, how users and the business are actually leveraging this data on a day-to-day basis. So it's important to engage with each business department, and it's important also to nominate data stewards, for example, to work within each business department. So this top-down approach is really important. Another element to consider is a risk-based approach, and to think about the risks related to different types of data across your organization. And this data risk-based approach is really important to build your data classification framework and to identify the levels of classification required for different types of data and the associated risks with them, so that you can then define the required controls for each level of classification, whether it's secret, internal, public, etc. Finally, what's really important when you're building a data-centric approach to security and data classification is to have a holistic approach that's end-to-end, where you're considering all the areas of your organization, where you're considering the ecosystem of third parties that you work with, where you're considering structured and unstructured data. And the key element to that is automation. And why is automation important when it comes to data classification? It's important because you need to really engage with your users when you're talking about data classification. And it can be really difficult to set up data classification across an organization without automation if it has to be completely manual. And it can be really difficult to sustain as well. So that's why automation is so important. It's important for your users. It's important in terms of scalability as well. And it's really important in terms of having a sustainable data classification approach. So it's important for your current systems and data, but it's also important for all of the systems and all the data that's changing on an ongoing basis. So I will now hand over to Derek to talk more about automation when it comes to data classification and how Getvisibility is doing this.
Thank you, Malia. I have to say, I work with a lot of data experts around the globe, and Malia is definitely one of the best who knows the opportunities and the pitfalls when you talk about data classification. So a great asset for you guys to have in the United Arab Emirates. But before I talk for a moment about the industry forces that affect the data landscape, I think it's important that we address the COVID-19 outbreak. And not only has it caused global disruption, it has also changed the cybersecurity threat landscape. And we are observing changing patterns of behavior from threat actors, and we're noticing waves of coronavirus related cyber attacks. And to be clear, this trend it's not unique to a global pandemic. Hackers and threat actors have typically preyed on shortly after disasters or high profile events around the world. And from first-hand experience, I've observed malicious actors exploit human emotions for financial gain. Notable global incidents are either elections or the tsunami in 2004, the mass shooting in Las Vegas, the Zika virus outbreak, and they've all been used as lures to compromise organizations, their networks, or indeed their data. And COVID-19 is not off limits. So as threat actors continue to adapt to exploit the coronavirus pandemic, the global workforce continues to change dramatically. And why is that important to data? Well, much of the world has been ordered to practice social distancing, and there's an unprecedented number of people who are now working from home for the first time. So companies and organizations are rushing to provision laptops for people who would traditionally have worked on desktops. They're setting up VPN infrastructure. They're trying to educate employees to use new collaboration tools so that they can work from home. And this provides opportunity to compromise the organization. And attack methods logically change as the global work environments change. And mass remote working provides significant opportunity. So therefore, it means that the way organizations control and understand and protect data has never been more important. So of the 5 main factors that we see impacting, and Malia has touched on a lot of them, the first is probably the regulatory mandate changing globally. So at a macro level, you have regulatory standards like the General Data Protection Act in Europe. You have many regulations coming in situ in the United States, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act. And as Malia just mentioned, you also have regulatory mandates in the Middle East, and specifically for industry sectors such as healthcare and financial. So the regulatory environment is becoming very punitive, it's becoming very stringent, and it's requiring organizations to look at data and try and understand it and protect it effectively. If you marry that up to the fact that we are now creating more data than we've ever done before, we've just an interesting metric. We have created the same volume of data in the last 2 years than we have from the dawn of humanity until 2018. So organizations are wrestling with massive amounts of data, and a lot of that data, 90% of it in fact, is in an unstructured format. It's in documents, and it's in emails, and it's in fluid information file formats that traverse your organization, maybe in the cloud, on premise, on devices. And it's very challenging for organizations to protect that. And also there's the challenge of multilingual. If it's in Arabic, if it's in English, if it's in German, if it's in French, there's a lot of challenges there. You also then have organizations moving to the cloud. And organizations are trying to avail of cheap compute and storage, which makes a lot of sense. But when organizations want to move large repositories of data from their existing environment into a cloud environment, that presents significant challenges. Who has access to the data? Is the data secure? Does it contain sensitive information, which could make you fall foul of the regulatory mandates? There's a lot of challenges there, and organizations who have to move to the cloud have to put a lot of thought into doing that right. One of the big issues we've seen last year was Boeing, the aircraft company, moved a lot of data into the cloud, and the data was not locked down properly. It was left with open access, and a lot of their code-based repository for one of their aircraft was accessible publicly. So it can provide, while there's huge benefits, it can provide significant risks. We've also seen a massive increase in cyber attacks globally. That's been expedited by the global pandemic we find ourselves in. And all of those attacks are aimed at accessing and taking your data. So all of the firewalls and the protection you put in, it's about protecting your intellectual property, protecting your data, which gives you a competitive advantage. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations struggle to understand exactly where that data is and who has access to it. And then finally, because of the complexity of this problem, organizations are struggling to lock the data down. While they implement zero trust methodologies around their perimeter and around their users, the ability to control and harden their actual data is a real challenge. So Derek, if you could jump on there. Talk about it. We recently ran a global survey of various different clients in different sectors and of different size. And some of the metrics were really interesting when you look at data. 62% of companies found that they had over 1,000 stale user accounts, meaning that they hadn't properly kept their hygiene around who could access what. And 59% of the data which was analysed was stale, or what we use a term rot, redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And that has profound impacts because that data could become a liability. It's expensive to store. It can be expensive to understand what's in it, and it can be expensive to move to the cloud. In another survey, 57% of companies found that they had over 1,000 sensitive files exposed, and the average company had over 500,000 files exposed, and 19% of companies had the entirety of their data, the intellectual property, open to all of their users, who could easily compromise that data and move it off-site to their Gmail or their Hotmail. And then finally, 55% of companies found, in terms of their folders, that they had over 100,000 folders open. On average, for the larger companies, 17 million files were accessible, and 28% of folders were open to every employee. So some of the figures are quite frightening, and we went across every sector. Some sectors, like government, had higher levels of intellectual property, but across all of them, the files which were analysed as sensitive, files which were exposed, and folders which were exposed presented significant challenges for organizations across government, energy, manufacturing, retail, financial, and pharmaceutical. So very quickly, if you look at how this challenge is dealt with currently on a global basis, organizations use tools to classify data, and they rely on their users to do that. So they'll have a little icon that will pop up in their documents or in their emails, and they will make a decision: is it personal, confidential, general, or internal? So it's very basic, and you are relying on the ability of your users to make that determination. So we've looked at this a little bit differently in terms of technology, and we look at it that there's two problems. One problem is your legacy data. Derek, if you could move on there, please. One of the problems is your legacy data. So that's your file shares, Dropbox, OneDrive, and that data repository can be enormous. And trying to understand that across Arabic and across English and other languages, and even documents which are images, such as schematics or other complex type diagrams, it's very, very difficult. And organizations invest huge amounts of time, energy, and effort with a pretty low return on investment. What that helps you do is understand your governance, risk, and compliance mandates. It helps you deal with rot. It helps you protect intellectual property. But that's only one part of the problem. The second part is the new data that's being created in Arabic or English, and that's being shared in emails, in Word, in Excel, in Visio, in AutoCAD, and the ability of users to understand how they should classify that data, if they should classify it, and what it should be classified as. And that becomes a huge problem for users. So you have two products. Both products are expensive. Both products rely on a lot of professional services. Typically, the products will only do specific languages, and then you need to make more investment for other languages. And that means that organizations have high failure rates. They experience insider fraud. It can be very expensive from a professional services engagement, and it can be difficult to manage. So we've consolidated that using machine learning. It's where you take all of your legacy data and your file shares. It's where you take all of your new data and you apply sophisticated artificial intelligence and machine learning to deal with the problem across Arabic and across English, which is some of real groundbreaking technology, which Derek will show you in a moment. But what it delivers for organizations is improved accuracy, better return on investment, and it allows organizations to effectively deal with the various compliance mandates across government, healthcare, financial, military, etc. So Derek, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ronan. I'm just going to enable my webcam if you will give me 1 second. So, thank you very much. Ronan has described the problem of unstructured data. And if you think back to Malia's slide, Malia said that one of the most important things to do is to understand your structured and unstructured data. Ronan said that 90% of that data is unstructured. So what we have done is we have combined, as Ronan has described, both the old legacy data, the documents that are in stores, repositories, and file shares, as well as the new data that is being created on the fly. And we now address both with Getvisibility. And I'd like to show you how this operates. I've got a live demonstration. So if you think about a user that will be starting to interact with documents, this is the unstructured data. And this is probably the most dangerous area of work, is when users are interacting, for example, with Microsoft Word. I've just started Microsoft Word here. If I open an example document, this is an invoice. This document is a typical document people might work on. You can see that this document has no classification, but can contain sensitive information about addresses and so on. Really sensitive document, but currently there is no way to protect this document because it's unknown. The level of sensitivity is only known by somebody sitting reading the text. We have automated that with machine learning and AI, so that if a user tries to save, for example, and it's not classified, we can configure Getvisibility to block that and to warn them to please save the document, classify the document before saving. We do the same with printing. So classifying this is as easy as clicking on the new icon, which gives you the options down in this box on the bottom right. These options allow the user to select both compliance levels. In other words, they can inform the system what compliance is relevant to this. Think of your regulatory mandates mentioned by both of the previous speakers. They are government compliance, there's standards compliance that a company might want to adhere to. And it's important to understand what is in this document that relates to those standards. So a purely manual classification would allow the end user, the staff member, to click on these icons that you see here, these buttons. And that's fine. They can select a compliance standard. For example, GDPR. This is all configurable on our management server. You can set up additional standards according to your organization. In addition, you can set the level of sensitivity or the classification, which is how sensitive this document is. How must it be protected? Again, it's all configurable. But where we differentiate with a lot of other products is we have got machine learning and AI that is assisting the user. And that is present in this box here you see on the left, which explains what the machine learning has thought is relevant for this particular document. It has read the text while the user is interacting with the document, and it has recommended certain tags to be on and off. The user can accept the suggestions, or they can save it differently. So I've selected different values to what are recommended on purpose, and I'm going to save those changes. So you can see the document has now got a header and a footer, and it's also had the metadata tags changed. So this new classification information travels with the document. But that difference between what the machine learning and AI is considering relevant and what the user has selected is important, because it allows our system to both track mistakes that are being made by users for the first time. This is valuable. You're not at risk of users misclassifying documents because they are now being checked, and it's done automatically by machine learning and AI. The second thing is, if the user is an expert user, we can learn, the system can learn from that change, from that difference in opinion. And that is super valuable. It's another unique selling point. So this is Word. The document is now correctly classified and can be protected with DLP systems or according to your internal document procedures in your company. This is a big step forward. The other way that people interact with documents is emails. So if I start Outlook, Microsoft Outlook, what we've got is we've got a very typical situation where a user can start a brand new email. This email can be sent potentially to an external person, and there can be information in this email that is very sensitive. I've copied some information from that invoice we looked at. Consider this email now to be very sensitive. So as a user, if I neglect any security procedure and I just press send, I'm blocked. This is a very important intervention to say, no, this document needs to be classified, or the email must be classified before you're sending it. So, okay, as a user, I now have realized I have to classify the document or the email. So again, I'm given some help. Here is suggestions about what this email is all about. And again, I can change the opinion, but let me go with confidential, because I'm being honest. This was confidential information. So let's save that. You can see there's markings added to the email. The header is modified, and this email is now classified. We would also adjust this, for example, for attachments that are perhaps sensitive, because of course people can attach documents as well. So now, if I send it, we've got a different warning, and let's look at this warning. It's a classified document being sent outside of the Getvisibility domain to KPMG. This is a problem. This is potentially a very dangerous activity that I'm trying here. So I'm being blocked, and that's very valuable. So as a user, I can now say, okay, this is something that I'm not allowed to do. I can get additional help as well from Getvisibility as to what my problem is. But the other thing I can do is I can declassify to a lower level of classification. And this is dangerous, but it's possible. With our software, we can block this activity. And that's very valuable. But I've enabled it for the demo. You can see the change has been accepted. It's now internal. It's not confidential. This is risky, but I'm doing it for the demo. If I send this now, I'm given a warning instead of a blocking action. And this is because our system can react differently to different levels of sensitivity. And again, this is configurable. And the important thing is everything is being logged in the background. So I can continue now, and I can send this email. So that email can now go. So you've seen now Outlook, and you've seen Word. You've seen interactions with the data. You've seen how the user is being assisted with suggestions as to what this classification is. But secretly, well, behind the scenes, we're logging every activity. And that activity can be used for some really powerful reporting. And this is where our partners in Starlink and KPMG use our system to derive important information. For example, you can explain, you can see what users are generating these risky activities. Which departments are doing it? Do those departments need more training? Or is there a misunderstanding of internal policy? Or is there some malicious activity going on? You can see it for the first time. And remember, the Getvisibility software, using its machine learning and AI, is stepping in and blocking activities that are risky if it's configured like
Derek,
that. Ronan?
if I could ask one question that's come in.
Go ahead.
When a user decides different classification settings compared to what the machine learning model advised, how do you decide who is right, the user or the tool? Manual processing.
So Ronan, there are two ways we can process that. Because the machine learning is able to tell us how confident it is in its prediction, which relates to how well it's been trained, and we've spent 3 years training our system, we can derive information from the user's activities if our confidence is low. But if that is turned off, we can then nominate certain expert users whose classification changes that we get are taken as information to teach us. They're instructions for learning. So we can use both approaches, but the safest is to nominate a set of users, and any changes that they make are used and brought back into the system to retrain the machine learning on the fly while they're doing their normal day-to-day activity. So if I can talk quickly about the de-escalations on the right-hand side of the report, this is very valuable, and we actually saw this. I declassified an email from confidential to internal so that I could get around that block. That's a dangerous action, and now you can go and do reports on it. You can see which user, which machine, what time, what email, what the subject was, who they were sending it to, what attachments they were, what the levels of classification were before and after. And it's super valuable to have that kind of granular report. This is the high-level summary report that you're seeing. In addition, there's another section from the same report that I'm using here for my slide. And this is misclassifications. And this is what Ronan just asked me now, is if a user classifies it differently to what the machine learning thinks. If that user is not a trusted expert user, it's a misclassification. It's a mistake that the user made. And our system is able to highlight that for the first time because we know what the document actually is all about. And we're able to see that the user, the staff member has changed, has got a different opinion. This can be dangerous. Why are they doing this? Do they need training? Do they need to be reminded of the policy or procedure? Or do they just need to be checked because they're maybe trying to exfiltrate or steal data? Very, very useful to suddenly be able to see all of this for the first time. So just a few slides on our multi-language support. We have been working on the Arabic language support now for most of this year, and it's built on our platform, which has been designed to be language agnostic. So what we've done is we've built a gold standard master data set, which our machine learning scientists and data scientists are using to build Arabic support into our system. So we understand text in both English and Arabic. We also support other languages as well. We also learn from the machine learning classification, normal staff activity, which we've just discussed. And we have some state-of-the-art data science, which reduces all documents to a completely anonymous representation. It's like a signature. And it means that our system works on totally anonymized, language agnostic information. And this is state-of-the-art. And it allows our system to be built with security in mind right from the beginning. Here's a screenshot, for example, of a login page on our server in Arabic. I'll go on. This is more interesting. Perhaps this is what the machine learning is aware of. The machine learning is trained to be aware of multiple document categories, subcategories of documents. These are the common ones in the default out-of-the-box system. You can see the classification levels are shown as well, which can be lined up with Microsoft Azure Information Protection or other DLP platforms, or just your internal classification taxonomy. If you've got internal and public, or you've got restricted and public, or you've got 17 different levels for each different department, our system can adapt to that. And it's also working across all of your Arabic documents as well. Finally, there's some results here. You can see that we've scanned a file server. We've found a number of different files. We've then classified them into categories. We've found compliance-related information. In this particular case, sensitive customer or staff data. And then there's some other metadata as well. Very valuable. We've got this type of detail for every single document. We're also able to see how users are interacting because we've got that activity as well on the laptops and desktops. So it's a complete picture. There are some screenshots here which are showing the same thing in English, so I'll skip over them. And we also show who can access the documents as well. This is a valuable extra dimension of activity of information. So now we've got information about the document, what's in it, how sensitive it is, who's interacting with it, who has access, and who has actually accessed the document in the last week, 2 weeks, 6 months. It's a complete picture of your unstructured data. And this leads you to be able to gain that information that Malia and Ronan have been talking about. So a quick slide on the actual deployments architecture. Getvisibility can be clustered. It scales horizontally. And we can support hundreds of thousands of endpoints, in other words, your staff members' devices. We also integrate to external sources if you have them. As Ronan mentioned, some people are migrating to cloud. But we've also got all the internal repositories, file servers, old stores of data. We can scan those automatically. So it's the best of both worlds. It's the old data and the new data, because you see all the endpoints and the agents here on laptops and smartphones and so on. This is a complete picture of your unstructured data. So just a quick summary, we can scan repositories of data and they become classified and they're ready to be protected. Or users can interact with the documents. We can correct mistakes. We can track them and we can do reports on mistakes. We can assist in training, better procedures, or better data governance procedures and security in your organization as a whole. So that's an overview of the product. And I'd like to hand back to Ronan. Ronan, if you wouldn't mind going through some of the extra use cases and the benefits that can be derived from the platform, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Derek, and thank you for that. I think one of the important points I would like to emphasize on what Derek spoke about is the groundbreaking innovation that we have put into data classification around the Arabic language. The classification of Arabic and English presents significant challenges. And what we found from dealing with various companies who have a mixture of both Arabic and English was that they want the ability for users to help train the model. So back to the question we were asked at the start, the main reason why data classification fails is that if there is a lot of compliance mandates, then the users tend to get confused. And if you have a user who is being prompted or advised by the machine learning, it helps them become more mature in their understanding of that data. But also it allows the organization to have the users train the model. And then because it's AI and ML, to quality check that at scale. So you almost have a symbiotic relationship where you can have your users help train the model if you're comfortable with it, and vice versa. And we feel that it's the only way to do that at scale across multiple languages and across vast oceans of data that rest in many different locations. But some of the very important use cases we are seeing, one is the protection of intellectual property. So organizations who want to understand where that IP is, and that IP may be in the form of code, financial information, unique competitive advantage information, business plans, stock market announcements. And where is it? Is it in the cloud? Is it in file shares? Who has access to it? What are the risks? That's a pretty big use case. Another big use case is your governance, and to Malia's point, across healthcare, financial, industry-specific regulatory mandates, but also government mandates and macro mandates such as the GDPR or the California Consumer Privacy Act. We're seeing that this is becoming a much bigger problem, and this is being amplified by some of the fines we are starting to see. We saw that the Marriott Hotel Group were fined $100 million for their failure to protect their data. And we saw that IAG Group, the airline, the International Airlines Group, were fined $200 million. So so managing the regulatory mandate, and then also when we look at data as being an asset, what we now understand is that data is also can be a tremendous liability. If you have data that's unsanitized, data that's at risk, data that gets hacked, data which you want to move to the cloud, if you do not know who has access to it or what that data contains, then it can present significant risk. And how can you protect what you do not have visibility across? So we see that rot and stale data as being a big problem. We see the ability to migrate to the cloud. Organizations such as KPMG and Starlink and these companies help organizations move large repositories of data into the cloud. But what actually is that data and who has access to it and what use cases are important to the business? And to do that effectively, it has to be automation. If you rely on purely human beings doing it as a manual process, it tends to fail. And then when you try and overlay your data loss prevention for Arabic and English and French and German, it is a real challenge. Data loss prevention only works effectively if it understands what the data is, what is sensitive, what data from a legacy perspective is important, but also data from a new perspective. So there's many different use cases across many different regulatory mandates that are very, very important. Derek, if you jump on. So to wrap up, we believe that the only way you can deal with this massive data problem is by automation. If you rely purely on your users, or you rely purely on regex or dictionary lookup generation 1 technology, they tend to deliver huge volumes of false positives. We believe the only way that it can work effectively is to have machine learning, a model which has been built with a security by design methodology and architecture. So for example, if you're in the United Arab Emirates, all of the data remains in the United Arab Emirates. It remains in your environment. Nobody ever touches that data. It becomes your machine learning model, but it allows you to automate at scale and to bring your users into that process, whether it's to help or whether it's to monitor, but it can be very powerful. That means you have a tremendous accuracy. You have far less false positives versus doing it purely manually or doing it by purely building rules to identify what data is. It allows you to understand if you have an insider threat problem or if you just need to train your staff, which typically you do if you go outside of internal, external, and private type classification fields. It provides the ability to adhere to very strict mandates at a macro level and at an industry-specific level, healthcare, automotive, financial, and so forth. It helps organizations like KPMG accelerate your migration to the cloud. This process of moving huge repositories of data into a centralized repository, you understand what data is at risk, what data you may need to delete or what you may need to archive or what data you need to encrypt and put controls around. And it addresses the best of both worlds. It does the new data and it does the legacy data. It has been designed with a security by design methodology. Again, that's important. So when we work in the United Arab Emirates or in Saudi Arabia, the data across Arabic and English remains in country within the client's environment. So it's very important to emphasize that. And we believe that having the ability to do live and legacy with one product across multiple languages using groundbreaking machine learning for Arabic and English is very powerful. So through our partners, KPMG, and also I'll hand over to Ahmed now in Starlink. Starlink are our distribution partner in the Middle East, a very important strategic value-added partner for us, who bring tremendous technical skills across both the regulatory environment and the technical support environment to say a few words. Ahmed? If we still have him, do we?
Thank you. Thank you, Ronan. In Starlink, and as the #1 specialized cyber and cloud solution in META region, we are very excited about our new partnership with Getvisibility. And actually, this comes with as a part of our commitment to the market to bring to the top of the breed technologies, which address the needs and trends and bridges the gaps in the market. And when it comes to the most important challenge that we are facing these days, which is data and managing the data, of course, we all agree that the data is the second most valuable asset for any organization after the people. It's very challenging how to manage your data. And as we learned today, Getvisibility develops a very unique solution that really, as a specialized in this domain, we get amused with that solution that combines, as we see today, a sophisticated technology together and machine learning algorithm to perform a very easy to manage and a very in few steps, very easy interface to manage and the data, and it performs that with high speed and high accuracy. In the market, we know the market very well. We are in the market in the UAE market since 15 years and across the Middle East and Turkey and Africa region, and we believe deeply that this partnership brings a really perfect match and there is a value that we can add to our customer and to the market, especially in this challenging time of unfortunate event of COVID-19 and the more dependency on the cloud and managing their data remotely. It's very important to have the visibility and to protect and monitor and scan your data. The most important thing I cannot stress more than having the right solution, managing your data with and plus I need to highlight here that we brought this expertise to be local here in the country. So for all of you, we have expertise here located in UAE who can help you from the technical perspective, from any question you need to take, any demo, any more information you need to have about Getvisibility. We are here. We are on the ground, of course, with the support of all the Getvisibility team across the world. But we are local, as Getvisibility are localizing and having their Arabic interface and English. And we also locals, and we are near to you. We are on the ground. We are here in UAE. We are in Saudi. We are across the region here to help you. And I'd like to take this chance to please urge every one of you, please reach out to us, whether in this call now, if we can open it for the question and answer, or later on, please reach out to us. We are your team. We are here on the ground to help you and really to get the benefit of this unique solution that we are talking about today. For that, I thank you, Ronan. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Maliha, for this very beneficial presentation. And I guess we can a Q&A for now, or...
Thank you, Ahmed. So we have a couple of questions. I'll start shooting through them. Malia, we have a question for you, and it is: are you seeing increasing regulatory mandates affecting data handling in what sectors in UAE?
Yes, thank you, Derek. Indeed, we are seeing a shift in the regulatory landscape in the UAE, particularly in the medical sector and the healthcare sector. We have a certain number of regulations that are at the federal level and then at the Emirate level. So, for example, if we take the case of Abu Dhabi, we have Federal Law Number 2, which talks about classifying data, about keeping the data in country, and about having data privacy controls in place. And we also have similar controls and mandates that are required by the Abu Dhabi regulations, such as ADEX, the Malafi checklist. These are similar requirements where you have to look at how you're protecting your patient data, you have to look at where it's being stored, you have to look at your third parties, and data classification is a key requirement in that space. We're also seeing a similar types of requirements in the financial services space with sectorial laws, and whether it's for companies that are registered under DIFC in Dubai or ADGM, with data protection laws in place for both, with a new one being issued by DIFC sometime this year. And again, data security is at the core of these regulations. There is a new law that will come out this year sometime that may be similar in spirit to the GDPR, that would have a broad broad implications for all organizations, whether it's public or private sector across the UAE.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Derek, how does your solution support multiple languages?
Okay, thank you, Ronan. So the system is designed, because of it has machine learning at its core. The system is designed to be aware of the languages that it's processing. So we have designed a state-of-the-art machine learning pipeline, and this system is able to map different languages and different text using natural language processing into anonymized representations of the documents. I mentioned it during the presentation, but it's very powerful because it means that we add an extra language pre-processing step onto our system, and all of the actual internal protection and detection and sorting and categorization is all done using a language agnostic mathematical version of the document, which means it's extra secure. It's security by design, but it also means that we are able to add multiple languages onto the same system at the same time. And so we're able to support multiple languages in production. And this has been very valuable for us. We're using it in this particular example for English and Arabic at the same time, as you saw in the screenshots. Thanks, Ronan.
Okay. Malia, another question for you. What are the main reasons you see data classification projects fail?
I think one of the key areas where we see failures in data classification projects is around failing to engage with the business, failing to understand where the data is being used across the business in terms of business processes. And also, one of the things I've seen is that you can have a very manual approach towards data classification. So you set up your framework, and then you have data stewards, and you do everything right in terms of governance. But then, because the approach is manual, there's a one-time exercise that's done, and then it's very difficult to keep an accurate picture of how that data is evolving across the organization and how the controls are in place. And one of the last things I would say in terms of key challenges when you're implementing data classification is around the user interface, and also having the right balance between automation and interacting with the user. What it shouldn't be is an approach where there's too much interaction with the user, where it becomes intrusive, where there are all these pop-ups constantly all the time, and then users end up ignoring it, and then it kind of misses the point of the whole exercise. I think one of the key things around this is having automation, and that's where your solution is very helpful. And the other thing is really having the right change management program in place when it comes to data classification, because it is a transformation and it is a journey that you need to take your organization through, and really a change of mindset as well.
Ronan?
Yeah, I think that's a very comprehensive answer. Thank
Ronan?
you. Derek? Yes,
if
Derek?
I could add something to the end of Malia's answer, just to remind the attendees on this webinar that our platform can be configured to be almost invisible with automation and machine learning. And the machine learning gives us that capability. We don't need the users to be interfered or interrupted with. We can configure that and dial it right back so that it's almost invisible, and it makes the maximum use of automation.
Very good. I think a good example, just to bolster that point, would be we've seen some government agencies in the Middle East, and their documentation was the majority, over 90%, was in Arabic, and they wanted their own staff to train the model themselves. So by having the ability to have users classify data, you have the ability to train the actual model. So it becomes quite powerful. We have another question there, guys. Is combining an AI-based data leak prevention tool to your tool can help detect false, negative, and therefore enrich your models? So can you talk a little bit, Derek, maybe about DLP and Getvisibility and the strategy around that?
Yes. So one of the big advantages of combining Getvisibility with a DLP system is that the DLP system is very powerful if it understands what the data is. So understanding what the data is is the classification problem that Malia and Ronan have described. So by automatically understanding the content of the document, we're confident that we're telling the DLP to take the right actions. And in terms of the actual false positives, false negatives, when we train the machine learning model, we train it on all of the different combinations of the confidence matrix. So false positives and false negatives, as well as positive positives and so on, true positives, I should say. We train it on all of those. We're able to look at a document that we've never seen before, and with high confidence, we're able to say how sensitive the content of the document is, whether it has certain compliance standards relating to it. That is so valuable to understand that there's financial information or health information or personal information that is relevant to data privacy acts and regulations. Knowing that with a high confidence means that you're taking the right action for every document. And that is the big step forward. We're not asking the staff member to tell us that. We're suggesting, assisting, and checking that they've got the right values in there. And over time, our system becomes very, very aware and understands all the data in an organization. And that's thanks to the machine learning. Ronan, I hope I answered that correctly.
Yeah, Ahmed, we have a question for you. There's a few questions about companies here who would like to test this in insurance companies and a few others. Could you maybe comment on Starlink's ability to provide training and implementation support services for companies who want, and solution providers who want to look at this?
The voice was breaking a little bit. I was writing down the answers at the chat, but yes, we do. In most of our solutions, we do provide the training, specialized training, whether we do it directly or with the backup from our vendor, and we can facilitate that training. So indeed, we can do training, we can do support, we can do help also the installation and running the products, make sure the products are running the way that the customer wants. So that would definitely can be arranged. And we do, actually we do two types of training, one specialized tailored training for our customer as per request. And we have scheduled training across the year and quarters that you can go and check in and see the training that you want to look at.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Again, I think we answered this in the presentation, but it's about the security of the data. Getvisibility has been architected and built with a security by design methodology. It has been built in such a way that the world's leading organizations and government agencies can leverage this technology and the power of it without ever having to move their data outside of their country or indeed outside of their own data center, whether that be public or private data center or in the cloud. So the entire system has been architected with that core aim of keeping it incredibly secure. Okay, I think we have a few people looking for follow-ups separately, which is fine. And unless there is any other questions, I think we've come to the end of the webinar just within the time frame. I would like to sincerely thank our presenters today, Malia, Derek, and Ahmed, for taking the time to join this webinar. I would very much have liked to been out in the United Arab Emirates this week. I was planned to be out on numerous occasions, but unfortunately, due to COVID-19, that has not been possible. I hopefully will be out there with our team for some of the big events towards the end of this year or next year. And in the meantime, I hope you all stay safe and well during this holy month. And we look forward to following up with people after this. So sincere thank you and have a good day.